All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 800-610-7035. My email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV, and our main website where you can listen to the X Zone 724 365 is www.xzoneradiotv.com. Once again, I'm asking as many people as possible to sign our online petition at www.stopebolapetition.com. I am petitioning the Canadian government to not allow, to deny entry or any aircraft or any form of transportation of anyone into Canada, whether a resident or a visitor, until they have been quarantined for at least 21 days to make sure that they do not have the Ebola virus. Now, this would be from any country in West Africa or any other country in the world where there is Ebola or the risk of Ebola. Now, once you sign the petition at www.stopebolapetition.com, a copy is immediately sent to the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Stephen Harper, our Minister of Public Safety, Stephen Blaney, as well as members of Parliament. This is serious. It is really serious. And, you know, I've been called a racist by other members of the media because of my stance of not wanting people infected or people coming from West Africa, from countries where the Ebola has been, you know, it's a fact. It's there. So what's wrong with that? That's not being a racist. It's called being a Canadian. I don't want any member of Canada, whether you're white, black, green, purple, blue, color has nothing to do with it. Ethnicity has nothing to do with it. You're a Canadian. I don't want Canadians to be infected. I don't want there to be one single solitary death in Canada due to Ebola. It's that plain. It's that simple. The website again is www.stopebolapetition.com. Joining me now is a good friend of mine, the one and only Corey Kay. He's the guy behind the X Zone Tech Zone at www.xzonetechzone.com. And Corey, first of all, welcome back, old buddy. Great having you. And I'm sorry you've got such cold temperatures in Florida these days. What is it, 60 degrees?
Oh, yeah. It dropped down all the way to 60 one day. And I am so acclimated to this weather that I actually went outside and blew into the so-called cold air to see if it would fog up.
And did it?
It did not.
Oh, there you go. We call that a heat wave up here. But anyway, listen, you and I were discussing a few things before the show, and one of the things we discussed was the J.P. Morgan fiasco. Tell us about it.
It's scary. J.P. Morgan and Fidelity Investments combined control $4.2 trillion of the world's wealth, and they were the victim of attacks, and this time actual credentials were stolen. And this is a little bit different than other attacks that we've talked about in the recent past because it mostly involved what's called social engineering. And it's not so much a technical hack as people manipulating other people to gain access to sensitive data.
So how would this work? Somebody uses regular hacking techniques to get into the databases, and the information that they take is to basically engineer a new person?
Nope. In this case, you can have one individual or a collection of individuals making calls to actual companies.
Mm-hmm.
And these companies, especially the banks, they have very strict regulations and guidelines in place. But on any given day, a very skilled hacker can convince someone on the other end of the line to give them sensitive data that they weren't supposed to divulge over the phone.
Wow.
So all it takes is that momentary lapse and some key information can be given out.
All right, Corey, stand by, old friend. You and I have to take our first commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Exonation, Corey K is our special guest, www.xzonetechzone.com. And Corey and I will be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as we continue checking into the world of the paranormal, the science of parapsychology, and all points in between here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, you can listen to the X Zone 724 365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com or by calling area code 213-401-0080. And long-distance charges may apply. I'll be back on the other side of this break with Corey K. Don't go away. Corey K is our special guest this hour, www.xzonetechzone.com. All right, Corey, you get these hackers that break into the JP Morgan database. They take information, and what do they do with it? How do they socially engineer it?
The social engineering aspect is the process by which they gather the information, and it's kind of a little strange even to me how that term gained widespread acceptance because, after World War II, if people spoke about social engineering, they were usually talking about either governmental action or at least a philosophy where, governmental powers were controlling people. But starting in the 80s, the term social engineering started being used in a computer hacking context. And all it really means is you're manipulating people. You're actually hacking people instead of computers. You're playing on their emotions to gain sensitive information that you can later exploit. And it's become a very sophisticated process. Whole books have been written about it, and you don't have to set up a phone bank. In fact, with JP Morgan, I think an employee knew another employee who knew another employee who saw potential gain. And so either a direct employee or someone who knew the employee was able to gain sensitive information or a very important high-level password, and in that way they were able to gain access to the database. And once they have that information, they start to build a profile on victims. Be careful what you put out online because especially social security numbers, because once they have your name, date of birth, and social security number, it's all over. They have most of what they need to carry out identity theft at that point.
So how do law enforcement officials combat something like this?
Excuse me, it's a little tricky. I know someone personally who had their credit card information stolen, and we were able to trace it to someone that's not too far away, who's less than an hour away. And we called the local police department there, and they knew about that individual. But because the credit card company had already forgiven the fraudulent charges, we never really heard back from them, and nothing was really pursued against that individual. And this was a rare case where you were actually able to find the attacker. So that was a little disconcerting. But I know in other cases, coordinated law enforcement efforts have worked. There is a virus I can talk about later that goes by different names. The crypto killer virus is sort of the latest manifestation. But in these cases, law enforcement was able to capture the hackers, and they confiscated information that the hackers had that could actually help the victims undo some of that damage. And they later made that information publicly available. So that's encouraging there.
It sure is. So how would a company then, do they have to put in new security protocols? Do they have to strengthen their firewall? Do they have to use different encrypted systems? How does a company prevent that from happening again?
The number one thing that they have to do is train the employees over and over again. I used to work in the banking sector, and we had to undergo new training every 90 days, and they just reiterated the importance of never divulging information. We had to gather about 3 pieces of information from the caller before we were able to even begin talking about their account. So it is getting stricter. Companies are being asked in the U.S. to comply with PCI and DSS laws, where in some cases it's so strict that you can't have paper and pens anymore because they don't want employees writing down customer information.
But if somebody has a photographic memory, that wouldn't help.
Yeah, that's it. There's always going to be crafty people.
Sure. In these places where the employees aren't allowed to have pencils and paper, do they have a system that would actually dampen any radio signals from escaping? For example, if somebody had a Bluetooth system and they wanted to transmit information from their terminal to somebody outside, are there security protocols in place that this cannot be accomplished?
Not in every building. It's not universally applied at all. Basically, some agencies, especially law enforcement, Homeland Security, any agency having to do with law enforcement and government agencies in general, they actually are more compliant, I think, than a lot of private companies. In some cases, they have what are called Faraday cages, and these cages can block cell phone signals from going out. Now, there are guidelines in place for placing your routers, so it minimizes the chance of someone outside the building intercepting those signals.
Right.
But it's up to the companies to apply those.
There should be some kind of filament that they can put on the windows that would stop that would dampen the signal, or put the person, or when the office building is being constructed, put something within the exterior walls so that the signal would be dampened. So there seems to be a number of loopholes that are still possible and would allow for hackers from either hacking into the data or hacking into a phone system that is out there. And this is kind of scary.
It is, and there's an iron wall of sorts that exists because the phone lines themselves now, everything that the employees do in these larger companies, it's all internet based now. So you can't have a building completely locked down. The internet is necessary for doing business now. And but I have on the other side, I speak to people every day where the building does have security in place, and they sort of weaken the wireless signal so it can't go outside of the building. But there'll be some people in a corner office who are in the dead zone,
Right.
so to speak, and they're wondering why their wireless isn't working, and they always
Wow.
think it's the wireless card, and it's never the wireless card. Sometimes we have them go to Starbucks or somewhere with public Wi-Fi first and test it there, just to rule out dead zones.
You and I talked about cell phones one day, and I was shocked to see that Samsung is doing so poorly compared to the Apple iPhone and the new companies that are coming up throughout Asia with these new cell phones.
Oh yeah, it's I'm shocked too, and especially with the iPhone 6, a lot of people are commenting on how similar this design is to previous Samsung models. And Apple and Samsung, they've gone back and forth a lot as far as lawsuits go. But I think there's the potential for more secure products. Funding is always an issue, but we'll keep applying fixes, and the hackers will probably keep finding ways around it. It's sort of a never-ending battle, but we've got to fight it.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Are there any thoughts as to what the next generation of technology is going to be, Corey? Like, we've gone from the basic 64K RAM computer to the supercomputers of today. We've gone from the big bulky cell phones to these very, very thin and very elegant smartphones. We've gone through so many changes within the world of technology. Does anybody have any idea where we're going to be going in the next 10, 15 years?
Well, I'll tell you what's really interesting. A lot of schools and a lot of firms are investing now in quantum computing, which we've talked about before. But as far as the near present, I can tell you about some models that we just received this week. I work for one of the top 5 computer manufacturers in the world, and we are coming out with computers soon, and we call them desktops because they're not tablets, they're not anything else, but they're so small that they're just slightly bigger than your average wireless router.
My gosh.
They're very tiny. Yeah. And because they're so small, they don't have those bulky power supplies. So you do have to leave them plugged in all the time just to get power to them. But they're very small.
What would the standard configuration be?
You would have an SSD drive, which the tendency over the last few years has been to make these SSD drives smaller and thinner by many orders of magnitude compared to a hard drive. And SSD drives, which are faster than hard drives and don't contain that platter inside, they have been more expensive than regular hard drives until recently. The price is coming down enough for them to make sense. So you're getting to the point where a 512 gig SSD drive is affordable. So you have that smaller drive. You have just enough airflow going in there to make it work. You do have a small fan, but some desktops now might have 6, 7, 8 fans inside them. We've got that down to 1.
Wow.
And I'm just amazed at how much you can do with that tiny little box.
Corey, stand by, buddy. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exxon Nation, Corey Key is our special guest. www.exxontechzone.com. And Corey will be back with me on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Hey, Corey K is with us this hour of the X Zone, www.xzonetechzone.com. Corey, do you remember having Norio Hayakawa on with us in the past, talking about Area 51 and UFOs and aliens, conspiracies and such?
I definitely do. He was more informed and about as dedicated as they get.
53 years as a researcher. And guess what he did last night on the show?
What did he do?
Quit.
Wow.
He said,
after all those years.
Do you know why?
Why?
After all that time, he has found no evidence whatsoever. Nothing. He said, it's as if I'm paraphrasing here, but I've wasted 53 years of my life.
Wow. It's kind of a sign. I was very shocked when SETI, I believe it was SETI, or whatever the agency was in the UK, when they threw in the towel. I'm like, man, I just don't know if people believe anymore.
Bufora, Bufora.
That was it.
Yeah. What is happening, Corey, as far as I can see it, is I can understand what Norio was saying. You know, I've been doing the show now for 23 years, and I have seen no evidence after all of these years. With the advances in technology that we've had with cell phones, digital cameras, the digitally able to verify and authenticate photos, nothing, whether it's UFOs, whether it's Bigfoot, and other aspects of the paranormal, including ghosts, there have been no advances whatsoever. What happens is as the researchers, the dedicated researchers, and the researchers who know what the hell they're doing, like Norio Hayakawa, they get fed up. They say, this is nuts. I asked him point blank during the interview whether or not, you know, we talked about, are there extraterrestrials? What about Area 51? The story behind Bob Lazar. We talked about the Dulce underground military bases. We talked about Roswell, New Mexico. We talked about alien visitations. And it all came down to no.
Yeah, and I think in so many ways it is all a reaction to, and I have to always be careful when I use the phrase materialism, because people mean different things when they use it, but materialism and scientific materialism has produced so many advances. It has produced a somewhat pretty coherent view of the world, but there's something missing there. And I think this search for UFOs and the paranormal, in large part, it was this quest for the mysterious, and maybe even a hearkening back to when religions of different kinds sort of ruled the day. But a few years ago, it seemed like there was this great divide. You had to accept this materialist view of the world, or you had to be more metaphysical and believe in strange things. And it didn't seem like there was any sort of compromise that could be reached. But I've just been looking at a pretty fascinating book, and I believe it's called Informal Nature. I'll get the title for sure soon. But in that book, he argues that it is the invisible things. Invisible things matter as much as material things. And if we're ever going to have a coherent view of reality, we have to take both into account. But the invisible things he's talking about are not Sasquatches and UFOs, but it's ideas, because it's hard to deny that ideas drive our world.
100% I agree with you. Plus the power of belief. A person's belief in something is the strongest power in the universe. Whether you talk to people about paganism, whether you talk to people about Wicca, whether you talk to people about Catholicism or any of the religious philosophies, they are still a hot topic. When you talk to people about UFOs or extraterrestrials, alien abductions, cattle mutilation, I can't see the numbers rising. I can see the numbers decreasing. The number of UFO sightings are falling. The number of Sasquatch sightings are falling. I'm talking about from reliable sources. But when you talk to the yahoos who go on the internet and think they're God's gift to ufology or whatever, these guys, I think if they look in the sky on a clear blue day, they'd see stuff.
Oh, yeah. Their belief has colored their view.
Exactly. And we were talking about reversed engineering yesterday because that's what people believe is happening in Area 51. And my outlook on reverse engineering is that if it was real, for one thing, I don't think the aliens invented Tang. So, but seriously, if reverse engineering was in fact used on alleged extraterrestrial craft, would we still be using the rocket propulsion systems that we're using to get to Mars, into orbit, or so on? Why would we use this archaic source of propulsion when we have the technology of a crashed UFO that is supposed to be at hand? It makes no sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. And at great expense, we're investing in the so-called archaic rocket technologies.
But speaking about technologies, you were telling me that there's a new software package out there that we should talk about, and it's called Bitdefender.
That's right. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because Microsoft has rumored in the last 2 to 3 years that they're going to stop marketing Microsoft Security Essentials. They've already kind of collapsed it into Microsoft Defender, but they're not investing a huge amount in that anymore either. And the possibility exists in the near future that free option that people have to download that software might be going away. So at that point, you wonder what free options are out there and who can I trust. And anytime you're looking for software on the internet, and I wish I had followed my own advice, PC Magazine is not a bad way to go because they make up-to-date recommendations all the time, and I have not yet been burned by their recommendations. They've never led me to a site that was actually malware, anything like that. But Bitdefender is a newer antivirus software. It's free. The people that test antivirus software for performance are very pleased with it. It seems to outperform AVG.
Wow.
And, yeah. That's a big plus right there.
It is. We were also talking about some shakings going on within the computer industry and the high-tech industry. We were talking about the poor sales of Samsung. Samsung reported a loss with other companies in Asia now picking up the handheld devices. Apple is Apple. But here's one topic that really threw me. Twitter is taking or has filed a lawsuit against the U.S. government.
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about that is something that's been very surprising in the last few weeks, a recent development. Basically, the government, specifically the FBI and NSA, they have demanded that certain companies that have developed better, safer encryption systems that protect the user, they're demanding that they put a backdoor in, and people are a little upset about that. the Snowden revelations are still on people's minds, and for these agencies to be asking for that back door, I think is upsetting people. And Microsoft, Google, Twitter specifically, they have voiced complaints that the government is basically badgering them for customer information. And I think, at least in part, that's what the Twitter lawsuit is about.
Unreal. So when we look at the entire scenario, do you see that the new laws are going to be repealed, or do you think that they're going to be kept going?
I think they're going to keep going. At least in people's minds, the current U.S. president, it was a pretty progressive guy, at least in a lot of people's minds. And if anybody was going to turn back laws that would allow wide leeway to security agencies, if anybody was going to turn it back, I think a lot of people thought that this president would. And the fact that he didn't repeal these laws might point back to discussions that we've had on past episodes. Maybe he saw the danger from terrorists and some of these criminal organizations, and maybe he said, well, if we turn back the clock on these laws, maybe we are letting the door open for great danger to ourselves. So we shall see.
Also, what is happening with the war? And I'm using that word very explicitly here because the different telecom communications companies seem to be falling apart, or they're merging. What's going on?
Well, right now, Time Warner and Comcast are trying to merge, and it's a really scary proposition in a lot of ways because once they merge, you really don't have that many cable companies left. At least in Florida, if they merged, I think they would have the whole state pretty much. You can go with DirecTV or Sirius. There's not, or Dish, I should say. There's not a lot of competition in that space. So there are a lot of industries where we're reaching the point of concentration where we really only have 2 or 3 big players.
But what's this going to do for the consumer? Is the consumer going to get a price break?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're going to get a price break. And the big deal is I think we're going to have less choice. I know this is a stretch, but the grocery industry locally is become more concentrated with Sweet Bay going out of business. And it's only 5 or 6 items right now, but as soon as Sweet Bay went away, there are about 5 or 6 items that we couldn't find in the remaining grocery stores. So we're already seeing less choice there.
Yeah, it seems that the amount of airtime you get, you watch TV, it's crazy. You see commercials for AT&T, you see commercials for this company, that company, and it seems as if everybody's vying for your business, but nobody is actually giving the consumer that big of a break.
Yeah, really. You have even tablets and computers. The price has been going down a bit, but it's still pretty high, especially for an iPad and iMac. Those are high price pieces of equipment there.
Do you think there will be another company that will come in and look to get in between that market between Apple and Windows and Microsoft?
They're going to try. It's going to be a little bit difficult. I think Apple, in the earlier part of this century, they had about as good a chance as everyone. And with all the talk about Apple, all the advertising and commercials, you would think that Apple and Windows split the market 50-50,
Yeah.
but in reality, they only have about 8% of the home computer market. So with all that aggressive drive, they really didn't put a dent in Microsoft, and people even thought that Windows 8 would be the downfall of Microsoft, but already they've come out with Windows 10, which I had a chance to test drive the preview release, and it's looking good.
Really?
So, yeah, I like what I see, and I think Microsoft is going to keep their position. Let me put it this way, it would take a revolutionary change compared to what we have now as far as an operating system to take that control away. There actually is one possible avenue I do see, though. On a lot of TV shows now, you're seeing people move almost holographic screens with their hands instead of sitting at a traditional computer. And if a company can come in and make that the future of computing, and it's not Apple and it's not Microsoft, then that company has a chance.
All right, Corey, stand by, old friend. You and I have to take our final break. Exonation Corey K is our special guest. Visit www.xzonetechzone.com, and we'll be back on the other side of this commercial break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. www.xzoneradiotv.com is where you can go to listen to the X Zone 724, 365. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Corey K is our guest of this hour, www.xzonetechzone.com. As always, Corey, great having you with us. Any more tidbits of advice for our listening audience?
Well, I can tell you about something that's coming up on the horizon. They're calling it the Internet of Things, but refrigerators, AC systems, locking systems, alarm systems for your home are going to be more connected to the internet than ever before. And you're starting to see this with cable companies even that are offering home alarm services.
Yes.
And there are some positives. Whenever my parents are out of town, they have an internet-connected video camera tied to their security system that's actually watching their cat while they're away, so can see what the tater tot is up to.
But how easy are these systems to break into?
It is possible, and they actually prolong the development of a internet connected car pretty recently because they were able to hack the car and stop it dead in its tracks.
Speaking about vehicles, Malaysian Airlines MH370, they have now a new theory that just before you get into the cockpit door area of the aircraft, there is a trap door, an access panel that allows you to get into a certain area of the aircraft that is a maintenance bay, and with a certain maintenance tool, you could actually take control of the aircraft. So now they're thinking that the aircraft may have been hijacked and is somewhere in one piece, which in my little weird world of conspiracies, number one, what happened to the passengers? Number two, what happened to the crew? Number three, who was the responsible party or parties? And number four, let me see, we have ISIS. And number five, we have Ebola. And number six, if you add number 4 and number 5 to chemtrails, hello.
Yeah, I honestly, unless you are taking hostages for ransom, it's hard to see what the advantage would have been there.
Well, if you need a jumbo jet, these passengers become expendable.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Corey, if people want to find out more about you, if they want to ask you any questions, how do they go about it?
If you go to www.xzonetechzone.com, there is a forum there, and I did have to beef up the security here recently, so you'll have to verify that you're a human being first, but as long as you're a human, you can ask your questions, and I will respond as soon as I get them.
Corey, always a great pleasure talking to you. My regards to your family. Say hi to Chance for me, and of course, George. And don't forget, Corey, you should not open PDF files if you're advised not to.
That's right. And say hello to Laura for me.
I certainly will, my friend. Take care of yourself. Always great talking to you, Corey. And one more time, give that website.
www.xzonetechzone.com.
All right, there you go, X Zone Nation, the one and only Corey K. www.xzonetechzone.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, go online and sign our online petition at www.stopebolapetition.com. My name's Rob McConnell. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break. Or as Arnie would say, I'll be back. Don't go away, X Zone Nation.